Good afternoon. I want to call to order this afternoon's meeting of the Senate Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Daly. Senator Cannizzaro. Senator Krasner. Here. Senator Steinbeck. Here. Chair Orenshaw.
Present. Madam Secretary, please mark Majority Leader Cannizzaro and Vice Chair Daly present when they arrive. We do have a quorum. A few general housekeeping reminders. I would ask everyone to silence their electronic devices. If anyone wishes to testify today, please sign in at the table by the door, either here in Carson City or down at Las Vegas, and provide a business card, if any, to the committee secretary. For those joining online, please be sure to mute your microphone when you are not speaking to minimize any background noise. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name and affiliation with any groups, if any, for the record. Then turn off the microphone, please, each time you're done speaking. If you are going to present handouts, we're asking for 20 hard copies for members of the public. Electronic copies should have been submitted in PDF format to our committee manager, Ann Stanley, 24 hours in advance of the committee meeting. We do ask everyone to be courteous and respectful to everyone else during interactions during the meeting, even if we may not agree with someone else's position on one of the issues. Committee members are using their laptops this session to view handouts and other documents. Please do not view this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. As a reminder, we may take certain agenda items out of order. Public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting. We'll allow each person 2 minutes to make public comment. I'd like to take a few things out of order. I'd like to start with our presentation from Emily Ronco, Policy Specialist, NCSL, National Conference of State Legislatures, Center for Legislative Strengthening. She's going to be presenting an overview of state legislatures and trends in legislative operations across states. Ms. Ronco, thank you for joining us from Denver. I appreciate your presentation. Please begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to the committee members. I'm just going to take a moment here to share my PowerPoint with you and just want to confirm that you are able to see this first slide.
Yes, we can see that. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Again, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. And I'm actually really thrilled to be with you because I was born in Las Vegas when my parents were stationed at Nellis Air Force Base. So I'm honored to be presenting to my birth state today. My name is Emily Ronco, and I'm a policy specialist with the Center for Legislative Strengthening here at the National Conference of State Legislatures. Me and my team cover topics about how legislative institutions operate, both as a branch of government and as a workplace. So today we're going to be talking about there we go. A few trends that we've been seeing in our work tracking legislative institutions. We're going to start off by talking about legislature typology, kind of how we classify legislatures across the country, trends that we're seeing in legislator compensation, and then also trends that we're seeing in how legislatures are managing their constituent communications. While we'll spend most of our time talking about the last 3 points that I just shared in the former slide, this is a larger list of some of the topics that have been taking up most of our time and that are getting a lot of legislative attention or discussion in recent years. I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone that AI is on this list, questions about how it's used, whether it's allowed to be used in legislatures, how is it regulated. It's a quickly evolving topic, and it keeps my colleague Will, who covers this, quite busy. The next trend that I'll talk about is government efficiency and modernization. Excuse me. Efficiency is, of course, in the eye of the beholder, but states are making efforts to modernize and consider what efficiency means to them. New Mexico and Kansas are both good examples and have current efforts in this area. New Mexico actually is in the process of adding district staff for the first time, personal staff for legislators. And they're also considering legislator compensation, which you may or may not know right now, they do not receive a salary. Kansas is focusing on technology in their modernization efforts, and they've actually dedicated a committee to legislative modernization. Wisconsin has also had a big push in this area that resulted in a centralized human resources office and a staff pay plan. Session lengths and interims have also been a hot topic. In general, we're hearing that sessions are busier and that states that have defined session lengths, interims are busier with more meetings than they have been previously. We have a report coming out actually next week about a survey that we conducted in 2001 and 2002 of a little over 700 legislators. And that survey and the report that's coming out suggests that legislative work is requiring more time now than it did 20 years ago, especially in part-time and hybrid legislatures. This, of course, impacts both members, legislators, and staff, as interims were traditionally a time for members to spend in district with their constituents and oftentimes working in their non-legislative careers. And for the staff, interims have been a time to recuperate from busy sessions, take time off, and focus on research, summarizing last session and preparing for the next. Lastly, we've been hearing from drafting offices that they're receiving more bill and amendment requests. And since not every bill gets introduced, we're getting questions about whether states are monitoring the number of requests so that the drafting office's volume of work can be more accurately measured as they're seeing an uptick in it. So I was asked not to share any images, so I apologize that I'm about to talk to you about a map that you can't see, but if you have a device handy, you can either click on the link if you have this presentation in front of you, or you can type in the URL at the bottom. But we use a typology here at NCSL to kind of categorize legislatures. It's called our legislature typology map. And while it's imperfect, it is useful for us to categorize legislatures from a spectrum of part-time to full-time. We actually call this our green, gray, gold map because what you cannot see on the map right now is that those three colors are represented. And we do that because part-time and full-time legislatures is not necessarily a black and white conversation. So the factors used to determine our typology are legislator pay, staff size, and the amount of time legislators spend doing the job. Session length is, of course, the largest component of this. So green states are more full-time with longer sessions, more staff, higher pay for legislators. Think New York, California. We estimate that full-time legislatures are about 80% of a full-time job based on previous surveys to legislators. Gold states are more part-time, a more traditional citizen legislature model typically. So a shorter session, less staff, and lower pay for legislators. We estimate this to be at least 50% of a full-time job. And then we've got gray states, which fall somewhere in the middle, hence the name hybrid. We estimate that hybrid legislatures are about 2/3 of a full-time job. And while their income may be a bit higher than the part-time states, it's usually not enough to allow them to make a living without other sources of income. Within this, when you look at the map, you'll see some shading in that green and gold. Those are our subcategories called full-time light and part-time light. And those are for the states that don't quite align with the full or the part-time category. Full-time light states have slightly shorter sessions, slightly lower pay, or slightly smaller staff than typical full-time legislatures. So they're kind of starting to lean towards that hybrid model a little bit more, whereas part-time legislatures are the opposite. They'll have longer sessions, higher pay, or larger staffs than the traditional citizen legislatures. And since you are not able to see this, I'll let you know that we classify Nevada as a gray or hybrid state. We have a saying here at NCSL that if you know one legislature, you know exactly one legislature.
Pardon me, Ms. Ronk, I'm sorry to interrupt. We actually do have a copy of the map in our handout here, at least for committee members.
Fabulous.
So we do have a copy of that map. We don't see it on the screen, but we do have a copy.
Perfect. I'm glad that the members in the room have that, and it'll be available, like I said, on that link for if this is posted later. Well, that'll be helpful for our next slide, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much. So as I was saying, we work with all 56 state and territorial legislatures. And so we are constantly reminded that each legislature is unique in some way, which makes blanket comparisons really challenging. But this slide considers a few specific points of comparison to give you an idea of how typology, session length, number of members, term limits, staff size, and staff agencies vary across 4 neighboring or regionally neighboring states for Nevada. So we'll go through each one of these one by one. But first I'll note that, as you well know, Nevada is one of only 4 states that meets biannually. The others are Montana, North Dakota, and Texas. So Colorado is similar to Nevada in session length. As you'll see here, it's 120 calendar days. And it also has term limits. Nevada has quite a bit more staff than Colorado, though, with an 8-to-1 staff to legislator ratio, whereas Colorado's, as you'll see on the slide, is 3-to-1. Arizona is like New Mexico in that it's also hybrid and has term limits. And the reason that we decided to include it here is that it has a satellite office in Tucson, much like your satellite office in Las Vegas. The staff to legislator ratio is also about the same, of 8-to-1 staff members to legislators in Arizona. New Mexico is the only part-time state included in this comparison, but it does meet annually, though you'll notice that their session length varies between odd years and even years. As mentioned earlier, they're in the process of implementing personal district staff for members, so the staff numbers represented here are going to bump up a little bit. And lastly, we'll take a look at Oregon. Oregon is also a hybrid state and meets annually, but we included it here because it is the last state to move from a biennial session to an annual session. Again, kind of like New Mexico, you'll see that their session length varies between even and odd years, but theirs is a bit more stark. They're also worth flagging because they're the only state included here that has more partisan staff than nonpartisan staff.
And Ms. Ronco, I had just a quick question. When did Oregon move from biennial legislative sessions to annual sessions?
Yeah, they moved in 2011, and it was actually a 2-year process. They did kind of like a trial run 1 year and then made it official the following.
Thank you very much. And members, if you have any questions, please. Senator Krasner.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm wondering why you put Nevada in the gray hybrid category, because we do not have staff of 8-to-1. We have biennial sessions and we only work 120 days in a 2-year period. So for the other, that's 4 months, every 2 years. So for the other 1 year and 8 months, we do not work, and we are not supposed to work, and we do not get paid to work. And we only have 1 staff member, and that's only during the 120-day session. So the other 1 year and 8 months, we have 0 staff. Didn't know if you're aware of that. And we have very low pay.
That is all very helpful information. So our typology was developed about 15 years ago, I believe, and is kind of due for a revisit. And that is something that we are hoping to accomplish through the survey that I mentioned we did recently. So that is all very helpful information. Our staffing numbers are based off of a staffing census that we do every 6 to 7 years, but it sounds like maybe those numbers are a little off, in which case I'd love to speak with you more and make sure that the data that we have is correctly aligned with what you're telling me today.
I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please continue your presentation. Senator Vice Chair Daley, Senator Steinbeck, any questions? No, really appreciate your informative presentation. Please continue.
Thank you. This is actually a great segue. We'll start talking about legislator compensation here, as this is something that I cover and spend a lot of time thinking about, and is one of the major topics that we are really getting questions about and noticing conversations in the states on. So this is a representation of our 2024 annual legislator salaries. You'll see that these are again divided by those green, gray, and gold classifications that we've just discussed. So we collect this data annually via survey. In even years, we collect information on base salary, per diem, and mileage reimbursement. But because compensation is much broader than just salary, we expand that survey in odd years to include questions about additional compensation for leadership, health and retirement benefits, office and staffing stipends, and travel allowances. I'm actually working on that survey now, so we'll have our 2025 information up to share later this spring or early summer. So this data is from 2024. I'll just flag really quick, as you'll see at the bottom of the slide here, that these only include states that pay their legislators annually and don't include the 8 states that pay on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So Nevada's salary, of course, is not included.
Ms. Ronco,
in this
I am so sorry to interrupt you.
No, please.
Somehow we lost the slide. We might have a technical issue here. But I know Senator Krasner has a question. So if I could go to Senator Krasner's question, and then we'll see if we can get the slide back up on our screen. Thanks for
Let
your
me,
patience.
absolutely. I'll see if I can do anything on my end as well.
Thank you very much.
Yes, now we see the slide. Senator Krasner, please go ahead.
Thank
Lovely.
you, Chair. I am looking at the map that shows legislator compensation on 2024 annual legislative salaries. So first of all, we are a part-time legislature and we meet biennially, so every other year. So we don't have an annual salary, and it certainly is not $41,000. Our base salary is $9,981 every 2 years. And then we get a per diem on top of that. But again, it's every 2 years. So if you took that 9,981 and divided it by 2, that's about $5,000 annually. We do get a per diem on top of that, but again, we don't get an annual salary. Thank you.
Right, yes, thank you so much for flagging that. So there are 7 other states in 2024 that, like you, do not pay annually. Those states pay either per day, per week, or per month. I will note that in 2025, our data will say that those are 7 states because Kansas actually just moved this year, at the beginning of this year, from paying a daily rate to an annual rate for their legislators. The reason that we don't include those daily, weekly, or monthly rates in these averages is because there's a lot of differentiation between states on whether they're calendar days or legislative days, whether there are limits on how many of those days can be included. And so it's just a bit too complicated for us to scale those numbers to a full year and still have that data represented with the annual salaries. But I would be happy to share, if you're particularly interested in the other states that do not pay annually, I'd be more than happy to share that information with you after this presentation. All that being said, for the annual salaries, we think that this is a pretty good representation of the national average and the category averages, again, with the note that it does not include 8 states here in 2024. Make sure that slide's progressing. Perfect. This is just another visual representation of what we've just talked about. This is a box and whiskers plot that shows the distribution of annual salaries. You can see that Washington, D.C., New York, and California are up at the top of that box and whiskers chart, and New Mexico is down at the bottom because they, of course, do not receive a salary. They do receive a per diem. And we're actually tracking a resolution there that would, upon voter approval, create a compensation commission to set legislator salaries. So beyond showing you what the annual salaries look like, here are some of the legislative compensation trends that we've been following the past few years. As you'll see, legislator pay is moderately trending upward. These percentage increases are calculated from the annual data that we collect year to year. In 2024, at least 14 states increased legislators' annual base salaries, and those amounts of increase ranged from $1,000 to about $33,000. Legislators in South Dakota, though, actually saw a salary decrease, as their salary is calculated as 1/5 of the state's median household income. And so with that fluctuation, their salary fluctuates as well. They experienced a pay cut of about $1,300 last year. This new year will also bring implementation of several 2024 compensation decisions. Maine lawmakers who receive different amounts in their first and second legislative session years will see a roughly $8,000 increase in both session years this year. Kansas legislators are moving, as I just mentioned, to an annual salary of $43,000 that went into effect on the first day of session here in 2025. In Colorado, they established a new commission through 2024 legislation. Colorado legislators' salaries were previously a percentage of municipal judges, but they're now moving to a commission model where that number will be set outside of the legislature and apart from any other specific metrics. And then they are also adjusting their per diem rates this year through that same bill that brought in a new commission, excuse me. Oregon voters actually rejected a compensation commission that was on their November 2024 ballots. And New Mexico and Virginia both have pending legislation this year that would establish compensation commissions. So we're seeing a lot of interest from states in moving to a compensation commission. This slide talks a little bit about why. So commissions date back to 1968. Both Michigan and Oklahoma established their compensation commissions that year. They can be established via legislation or through ballot measures. About 13 of the 23 states with compensation commissions did so through ballot measures. But it's also interesting in that some states have had several iterations of compensation commissions over the years. Kansas is a good example. We've talked about them a lot today, but they had a commission back in the late 1990s that went defunct after the legislature ignored their recommendations for a few years in a row. It was brought back in 2023 and it was given more power than the previous commission had. So when we're seeing those new or refreshed commissions, they're typically becoming more independent and given more authority than they were previously in their first or even second versions. And as far as why compensation commissions seem to be a popular topic among legislatures right now, you know, we call legislator pay a third rail issue. It's a touchy subject. And so it seems that more legislatures are exploring the idea of moving pay decisions outside of themselves for political reasons, optics, and also because it can promote citizen involvement and opportunity for citizen input. There are differences in how commissions are structured and how much authority is given to them. As you'll see on the bullet points here, some commissions recommendations take effect automatically without any legislative action. Alaska and Hawaii do this unless the legislature passes a bill, as does Washington states, whereas others are structured to be more of a recommendation, and the legislature either needs to accept it or strike or amend them via legislation in order for the commission's decisions or recommendations to go into effect. And the last trend that we're going to talk about today is constituent relationship management software, or CRMs. CRMs kind of embody the structural differences between legislatures and really represent that if you know one legislature, you know one legislature idea. We've had a lot of requests on this topic in recent years, both from legislatures looking for options for CRMs and also from legislators asking about how other states track their constituent requests. We think the increased interest is because of increased accessibility to legislators and a new expectation of fast and personalized responses. You all know this very well. Writing an email, sending a text, or even messaging on social media can take a lot less time and maybe more appealing to a constituent than writing and mailing a letter or coming directly to the Capitol to see you. Not to mention that mass communication, of course, you know, is coming from advocacy organizations. And so this is all contributing to the higher volume that we're hearing about. So CRMs are products that can help manage the number of requests coming in, especially as that volume is increasing. And they can also create reports to help identify topics or trends in constituent communication. And some of them can even go so far as to help prioritize based on whether a message is unique or if it is specifically using some of the same language as other ones that are coming in. For the states that we're aware of with CRMs, there's a fairly equal spread between these three types of provision, whether it's the legislature providing it centrally, it's caucus or chamber provision, or if individual members are purchasing them themselves or using them for themselves in their office alone. So just talking a few examples of CRMs that we've seen for the legislature-wide versions. Michigan is using a program called IndyGov Constituent Service Platform. Arkansas and Kentucky IT staff have developed customized CRMs using Microsoft tools. And Oregon has also customized a specific Microsoft tool for their members. In the caucus, chamber, and individual systems, Michigan, oh, excuse me, this is duplicative, but it's correct on your slide. Most interestingly in this category, though, are New York and Massachusetts, as they have developed theirs and then provided the open source code so that other legislatures or other legislators who want to use it are able to go in, pull that code, and replicate their program. And that is all the information that I have for you. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any more questions that you have now, or please feel free to use my contact information to reach out in the future, either about these topics or about anything related to how legislative institutions operate.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ronco. Appreciate, native Las Vegan. Sorry we lost you to Colorado. Appreciate the great presentation. Members, any questions for Ms. Ronco? No. Senator Krasner? I just have a couple of quick questions. If this wasn't covered in your presentation, but I know here in Nevada, and I think in other legislatures, we've tried to work on things, to make legislators who are parents have a little bit of an easier time, like lactation rooms, daycare. Is that a trend you're seeing across the country?
That is a great question. It is something that I'm hearing a lot about. Virginia actually is piloting this, I think, this year. And there is another state that I am blanking on right now that does provide on-site daycare for both staff and members. And I would be happy to follow up with you on the name of that state. But I would say at this point, it's still kind of few and far between that we're hearing about those things being implemented.
Okay, sure. I would be interested if you have the time for that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. Not seeing any other questions. We'll close that agenda item. We appreciate all the hard work NCSL does. Thank you for this presentation today. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You as well. It's our pleasure.
With that, we'll now move back to the presentation of our policy brief. We have our policy analyst, H. Pepper Sturm, with us, and we're really lucky to get to work with Mr. Sturm. And I know he and my mom worked together when she was in the assembly, and I always heard, great comments from my mom about working with you, Mr. Sturm, on legislation and on research, and appreciate getting to work with you this session. And I appreciate you presenting our policy brief. I'm sorry we've had to move it due to, I know I had the flu and I was out, and appreciate your patience here. And please begin whenever you'd like to. Thank you, Mr. Sturm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here today and pleasure to work with you. I'm Pepper Sturm, Senior Principal Policy Analyst with the Legislative Council Bureau. And before I begin, as a reminder, I am a nonpartisan staff, and as such, I cannot advocate for or against any measure. I'm here to provide an overview of the committee brief, copies of which are before you and are available on Nellis. But don't worry, I am not going to read the whole thing. Pages 1 and 2 of the committee brief list the committee staff and describe our committee jurisdiction. And at the top of there, page 2 is a nice chart that shows the NRS chapters that will have legislation that will come before us. And I'll note that since bills relating to carrying out the business of the legislature are exempt from calendar deadlines, this committee may be a little busier than most after the second House deadline because those bills will be exempt. So we may be having hearings after the May deadline. But as far as our current deadlines for non-exempt bills, all bills need to be passed, if at all, out of this committee by April 11th, and then out of the first House on April 22nd. And then the second House deadlines are listed there on the bottom, on May 16th and May 23rd are the second House deadlines. On page 3, the table at the top of the page provides bill statistics from previous sessions, and as you can see, last session we had a total of 54 bills that were referred to this committee, bills and resolutions. 31 were Senate, 23 Assembly, and of the 54, 30 were passed and signed into law, 8 were vetoed. Major issues from the last session are listed on pages 3, 4, and 5, and you'll see there the constitutional amendments and ballot questions on page 4, and some of the initiative petitions that we will likely see again. Pages 5 and 6 list topics discussed by the Joint Interim Standing Committee during the 2023-24 interim, and that includes BDRs for this session. And you'll see those pre-filed bills listed on page 6. 6 and 7 list those pre-filed bills for both committees, both the Senate Committee on Leg Ops and Elections and the Assembly counterpart. And at the bottom of page 7, you'll see possible issues for this session, and I'm sure many of you will recognize these. Elections generally, ethics, legislative operations, state personnel, voter registration, those sorts of things. And the final page lists the Research Division publications that may be of interest to committee members and any of those people following the committee's activities. And Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions for Mr. Sturm? Nope, not seeing any questions. Thank you for the presentation. Really a pleasure to get to work with you. Mr. Sturm, thank you for all your help. And then I wanted to move to bill introductions. We have a bill, a BDR 17-512. I handed out hard copies to all the members. This came out of the Interim Committee on Commerce and Labor that was chaired by our former colleague, Senator Spearman. This is a bill regarding a proposal to provide for health notes to be requested and prepared for certain legislative measures by the Research Division of the Legislative Council Bureau. At this point, if members have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer any questions about the bill. However, I would be asking for a motion to introduce the bill. A motion or a vote to introduce doesn't mean you're committed to support this bill. You know, if it is introduced, it just means that we're moving that it get introduced, and then it could have a hearing or could not, but it would have a chance through the legislative process. It doesn't mean you make any commitment to support the bill or vote for the bill if it becomes a bill. And I can take a voice vote or a roll call vote if members want a roll call vote. Members, are there any questions about BDR 17-512 that I can answer?
No, I read.
Nope.
I make a motion to introduce BDR 17-512.
Thank you. I have a motion from Senator Krasner. Is there a second?
Senator Steinbeck, I second.
Thank you. I have a motion for introduction of BDR 17-512 from Senator Krasner. I have a second from Senator Steinbeck. Is there any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Madam Secretary, please note that there are 3 ayes. Vice Chair Daley, Majority Leader Canizaro are excused. With that, the last item on our agenda today is public comment. And anyone here in Carson City, other than our staff, today we didn't draw a big crowd today. And then, but staff are welcome to make public comment, or in Las Vegas if anyone wishes to make public comment. But I don't see anyone in Las Vegas. With that, broadcasting, could we go to the phone lines? If there's anyone who wishes to make public comment, we are limiting it to 2 minutes per speaker.
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Again, if you wish to provide public comment, please press star 9 now. Caller with the last 3 digits, 561, please press star 6 to unmute yourself. You may begin.
caller, please ensure that you are unmuted on your phone on your end as well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we can
Hello?
hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Please state your
Okay.
name for the record and please proceed.
My name is Jane B. Davis. I'm from Nye County, Nevada, and I wish to address poll watchers' restrictions on Election Day. United States Code 245, quote, federally protected activities, unquote, states whoever interferes with any person qualifying or acting as a poll watcher shall be fined or imprisoned. The Constitution of the state of Nevada states each voter who is qualified, elector, and properly registered to vote has the right to have questions concerning voting procedures answered and to have complaints about elections resolved fairly, accurately, and efficiently. This is repeated in the Nevada Secretary of State Voter Bills of Rights. NRS 293.274 states members of the general public shall be allowed to observe the conduct of voting at a polling place. Nowhere in these documents and statutes does it state that someone who wishes to observe the people's election process must disclose their party affiliation, nor is it mentioned that seating for the public will be limited to 3 people. 1 seat for a Democrat, 1 seat for a Republican, and 1 seat for a nonpartisan citizen. Yet in the 2024 general election, such limitations existed at various poll locations, with citizens being prohibited from observing their election process. Acts of this nature towards citizens who wish to view the people's election process are a form of intimidation and in violation of Nevada law. Nevada's legislators must address these unlawful acts with legislation that declares these acts as a Class E felony, commensurate with NRS 293.710 and NRS 293.705 in support of the rights of Nevada citizens. Thank you.
Chair, there are no more callers choosing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you, Broadcasting. And members, thank you for your attention today to the hearing. And with that, we are adjourned.